Oh, well, hello there, and welcome to A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. Today, I thought I would delve into into the murky waters of independent horror with the 2009 Canadian-produced film Pontypool. It's as I've said before, horror really does thrive, in my opinion, better in the realms of independent cinema. Partly because horror is it does better when is allowed to be experimental, whether that succeeds or fails. Now, a film like Pontypool is a demonstration of how horror works better with minimal cast, contained locations, and it focuses more on the building of tension before the payoff, the catharsis. I want to say relief, but it's not relief. It's the opposite, I suppose. Because of course, the relief of being scared is as cathartic as sort of the payoff of a punchline with humour. And Pontypool definitely comes from a sort of history, or at least has a legacy in regards to creating the radio station setting, the not aware of what is going on the outside, or the contained space, the prickly figures who are all sort of having to just about manage together. I mean, of course, it goes back to the last broadcast, which is one of the sort of proto-found footage films of the 90s. And even though not a radio station-centric story, but you go to something like 10 Cloverfield Lane, which again, the confined space, the uncertainty of the outside world, you get that sense of how it affects people psychologically, as well as the fear of what is happening on the outside. Now, I've talked before about how traditionally I am not particularly interested in zombie films. I don't find them... I find them a bit too limiting in the kinds of stories that can be told. I understand that the zombie horror is more about the characters who are having to survive the zombies and being a psychological study of those characters. But I just find the context and the circumstances a little too repetitive. Now, what I will appreciate, and what I'm starting to have a greater appreciation for when it comes to the zombie flick, is not the zombies themselves, because I do think that the legacy of the zombie film is now tied to Romero and his style of zombie, and any variation we have thereof is just either a evolution or replication of that Romero zombie, or a subversion, but an obvious one, like the Danny Boyle fast zombies. And so I just don't find them a particularly interesting monster, because they are broadly the same thing again and again. But what I think works with the zombie flick, and where the horror comes in, is the nature of the contamination. And that's something that I think Pontypool does in a really experimental and strange, cerebral way. And this is where the sense of horror as experimentation comes in. Because, and this is a spoiler, I suppose, for the film in regards to what is spreading the virus, and so from this point on, I am going to sort of talk about the film in a spoiler sense. But the virus is not spread by biting or any of the traditional, or blood, or any of the traditional ways zombie viruses are spread. It is spread through the activation of certain words. So a character comes in and sort of hypothesizes, and it seems to be proven true, that people are being infected because certain words are infected, and when they hear certain words, it causes their minds the infection gets into their minds and slowly erodes their minds until they're turned into almost a transmitter themselves, where all they can say are phrases, that the last phrase that they've heard, just repeated until they hear a different phrase. And it's a strange way of, it is a bit cerebral and a bit like, okay, I guess I'm going with this. The idea that, words are the cause of the virus. But the way that it builds up to it, and the way that it's experienced by the characters, does have a certain authenticity to it. You have bought into the world of the film enough that the weirdness of the premise doesn't cause you to go, oh, this is too ridiculous. I've switched off. And I think that's, again, all within the directing. As I said with Memento, limited cast. It's all in the acting and the directing, and the use of having very little to create a lot. And I do think, the film primarily has 3 actors. It then loses one actor and replaces them with another. And then, of course, on top of that, you've got the radio station, because it is all set in a radio station. And, of course, they have callers in. And the callers in are, of course, another layer to it. The idea that we have these voices, these people who are calling in, these characters, and yet we never see them. All we ever get is our main characters reacting and responding to them. But that gives almost that audio drama aspect to it. The idea, of course, the theatre of the mind. Certain, in a lot of the radio work I've written about, I talk a lot about theatre of the mind, and the idea that radio drama is a psychological, works on the psychology, the idea of voices in your head, hearing voices and creating a world, a theatre space within your own imagination, and what you can do with that. And I think this film absolutely uses that to its to its nth degree within the cinematic space. So you get the characters in the radio station interacting, but you get the sense of the outside world through this almost audio dramatic level to it. It's, as I say, very experimental. It's quite fun to see a Canadian film. I don't think I've seen many independent Canadian films that I can think of. And as I've said about some of the other worlds of cinema that I've discussed, it's interesting to see how the storytelling style differs from, say, a Hollywood or a British film or a Australian film, or there is something, I can't put my finger on what exactly, but there is something different about it, unique about the way that they portray stories, the way their actors perform with each other. Just something about it that I haven't quite determined yet. And like I say, it appeals to the radio person in me, it appeals to the horror person in me, and again, I like the fact that it's a very characterful story, and you just have these 3 people who initially are just trying to get on. It sort of talks about the local politics of radio stations and local communities and the function of the radio station in small communities, and then the necessity of, as the film goes on, the necessity of the radio broadcast and what can be done with it and the ways in which they combat this plague or try to process what's going on around them. It does go to a very strange place at the end, and it is one of those films that you have to sit through the credits and then into the after credits. But even then, very strange ending. But in that respect, it makes me think of something that possibly does it a bit better, which is Barbarian Sound Studio, which I think really taps into the way words and our own minds affect us, or sounds, I suppose you'd say with Barbarian Sound Studio, the way sound affects our minds. No, this is interesting, fun, quirky, weird film. Anyway, thank you for joining me. If you like this video, hit the like button, comment below, and share the video, because this will help me in the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to get notifications of when new videos are uploaded. Check out my back catalogue of over 200 videos, and follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley, where I tweet about TV shows and films, and I share these videos once they're uploaded to YouTube, either the day of or the day after. Thank you for joining me. Take care.